see if Professor Jones is in. He can talk to us about interviews.
Hello. Oh, hey, Nelson. How you
Hello,
doing?
Professor Jones. Can we come in?
Yeah, sure. Come on.
Thanks very much. Let me just set up here. I'd like to show, actually, before we film, I'm going to show your office, because it's a great office.
Okay.
With all the books.
Yeah, well, most of those are fake.
They don't look fake to me, and they all look like they've all been read. Anyways, this is Professor Erik Jones. Thank you, Professor Jones, for chatting with us today. The subject today is about interviews.
Mm-hmm.
We interview all of the candidates for SAIS Bologna, which is a bit unusual. So, and you've done a lot of these interviews, by the way, so that's why we're speaking to you. And the first question is, then why do we interview all SAIS Bologna candidates?
Well, look, we get students from probably about 100 different countries. Over the lifetime of the Bologna Center, we've had more than 100 countries represented. And all these countries have different educational systems, and they all have different transcripts, and they all have different traditions. And so what we need to do is figure out some way that we can compare people from one place to the next. And what we've discovered is the best way to do that is face-to-face. Since the decision to bring people into the Bologna Center is probably the most important decision that we make, we figure that we've got to invest in that. And we wouldn't trust ourselves if we were just working on paper across such a diverse set of environments.
Now, we do a good many of these interviews on site. I know you're traveling to Brussels and also to Vienna. Mm-hmm. We travel elsewhere in Europe. We'll be doing some of these in the United States because we have some non-Americans there. But we don't interview everybody in person. We interview about half in person, about half on the phone. What are we looking for in these interviews?
When we interview, what we really look for is to see how people think. We're not going to ask tricky questions like what was in the paper today, and we're not going to try to catch you up on dates or names or figures. What we really want to see is how you handle information, how you combine concepts, and how you make arguments. Because what we try to teach at the Bologna Center and what we pride ourselves on is that synthetic analytic capability, which is also what employers look for when they come to the Bologna Center to try to hire our graduates. So we look for that ability, and then we use that as the foundation upon which to add value and build your education.
So if I've forgotten Metternich's birthday, I won't be punished?
Yeah. We don't know what Metternich's birthday was. So if you've forgotten it, that's probably okay.
Would you have any advice to someone on preparation for such an interview? Is there any preparation one can do?
Well, the easiest way to prepare is to read the newspapers, and probably also The Economist. The reason I say that is not because we're going to quiz you on current events, but because we've got to talk about something. And current events is something that we can generally assume most people will be able to talk about. Like I said, our goal is not to test your knowledge, it's to test how you handle concepts and information. So whatever you prepare is going to be fine. The more comfortable you are, the better the interview is going to go. So do something, because if you don't do anything, you'll be much more uncomfortable when you walk into the room.
Is it also important for a candidate to know why they're applying to SAIS Bologna, how they could make a difference, and how it would benefit them?
I think it's really important for people to know why they're coming to the Bologna Center, but I don't think that knowing why you're coming to the Bologna Center means knowing what you're going to do for the next 50 years of your life. Most people come to the Bologna Center precisely because they don't know. And what the Bologna Center has to offer, I think one of the great strengths of the Bologna Center, is our ability to expose you to what international careers are all about. Let's face it, unless you grew up as the kid of a diplomat or something like that, the likelihood that you'll have come into contact with people who have international careers in sufficient number to give you a sense of the variety of jobs that are out there is virtually zero. And since you've never come into contact with these people, how are you supposed to know what you want? What we want is for you to be curious. And what we also want is for you to be committed. So when you say, I know I want to go to the Bologna Center, we'll ask you why. And a good answer could be, because I want to explore what international possibilities there are. It doesn't have to be, I know exactly which international possibility I'm going to take.
Now, you've done a lot of these interviews, Professor Jones. Could you give us a taste of how you might proceed in one?
Well, the way I start off every interview is by saying, look, we're going to have a conversation in 3 parts. In the first part, I always ask silly questions about you as a person. So I'll ask you a little bit about what you grew up, where you grew up, what you like to eat, what you like to do, anything I can to make you feel comfortable, because feeling comfortable is probably the most important advantage that you can have in any interview context, let alone an interview that could change or alter the course of your life. Once I've got you feeling comfortable, that's when I feel like it's okay for me to move on to what I call tricky questions. Now, tricky questions are not these factual questions. We've already covered that. Tricky questions are questions that force you to interrogate the way the world works around you. Consider the situation in Egypt, for example. We've just had this democratic revolution in Egypt. Does this mean that the Bush administration's policy of supporting democracy in the Middle East was a success? That's a tricky question because it forces you to engage with current events, but also a little bit of recent history and try to put concepts related to democracy together with what you saw in the paper or on the news. Now, after we do that, we go into the third phase, and the third phase is the trickiest phase of all. That's where I give you the opportunity both to know how the rest of the process is going to unfold and to ask questions yourself. And I think that this is where students get the most concerned because they're like, oh no, I've seen everything on the web, I've read all the information, I don't have any questions. And you know what, that's perfectly all right. If you do have questions though, I'm there. And another reason that we do the interview is to give prospective students the opportunity to ask questions that they might not have considered or might not have found the answers to easily available on the web.
Professor Jones, that's terrific, very useful. Thanks so much. I know you're busy. We'll let you go. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye now.